Welcome everyone to Frank Finance, where you can get your honest financial information and your questions answered. Today's discussion is going to be talking about investing. This is one of the most interesting things that people ask me about. So really the first question is, what is investing? Well, investing is when you give up your financial cash, for the most part, to either a company when you buy stock or an asset, whether you buy a vehicle or a house, real estate, or anything of that nature, that in the hopes that it's either going to generate passive income in the example of real estate, or it's going to create value down the road to where you buy stock today at, call it $10, and tomorrow it's worth 50, meaning when you retire. Or you buy stock at $10 and it stays at $10 in the future, but it pays you dividends, which is another example of a type of stock that people buy into, which would be dividend stocks versus growth stocks. And so those are the type of things that we're going to talk about today. I will not go into real estate investing. The main focus today is how do you take money that you have for cash flow so that you can retire when you're 40, retire when you're 50, and ultimately so you're not broke when you're 60. All right, so investing. Let's talk investing. Before we really dive into the numbers though, the first thing you really have to do is think about your budget. Think about what is your cash flow and how do you feel about where you're at today, because think about that, because that's going to be very important to determine what you think your life needs to be like in 20, 30 years from today. Let's ignore inflation for these discussions. Everything we're going to talk about today is going to ignore inflation, because if a Coca-Cola bottle costs $1 today and it costs $2 in the future, those inflated rates are going to be in the stock market and everything that you purchase. So let's keep ourselves out of the inflation game here and just focus on the moment and where we're at right now. Now, that might not be perfect advice, but it's at least to get you started and start thinking about what you need to do to achieve the goals to retire when you want to retire and under your circumstances. No one else can try to do this for you. It's under what you want. So, with that all being said, I'm going to, as before, share my screen and talk through a couple items here, and we'll work through some items. As I've mentioned before, below in the description, there is a Discord link. That is where you get these files for free. This is something you can go out here and play with all you want. Inside the Discord, there's a hashtag finance files. That's where you'll be able to find this document. It is going to continue to roll as we continue to discuss new and more information to help you be able to take control of your finances the way that you want to do it. All right. So let's kick it off here. You guys remember us talking about this document here. This was part of the budget review that I started for my very first video. For this example here, we're going to talk about someone that makes about $50,000 a year is roughly where this individual lies. Their after take-home pay is about $3,000, and their total expenditures average each month about just shy of $2,500, which means that their cash flow is close to $600 a month. So now the question with this is, and again, this is for all of you to use in your particular life here and figure out what that cash flow is, because that is very important to figure out how you want to do this managing forward. So with that, I'm going to assume that this person has $600 of cash flow just for easy numbers, and I'm going to flip over here to the investment tab where we're going to talk through investing. There's two parts with investing that really talk about is both personal investing as well as 401k investing. So we're really going to start about the personal investing. And so what you're seeing here is kind of a three-part strategy with this file. So part one is really to talk through where's your starting value, how many years do you want to invest, how many years do you want in retirement, and then I have a macro in here that you just hit Control-Shift-N, and it calculates your burn rate that you can burn per month in retirement. And then same for your 401k. So everything in yellow in this entire file here is for you to put in and play with and watch it dance, basically. They'll dance better than that. All right, so we'll start with investing here. So let's say you're 20 years old, you're starting off, you got your first job, it's worth $50,000, as I'd mentioned out of the budget, so that gave you a cash flow of about $600 a month to play with. You want to invest for the next 30 years so that you can retire at the age of 50. Now, at the age of 50, that means I would need about 35 years in retirement, wouldn't it? That puts you at about the average age, or gives you puts you at 85, which is right around the average age that someone unfortunately passes away. And so I'll just come in here and type in 35. Ignore this end of retire for now. We got to finish some of these items down here, and then we'll hit the macro and let it do its thing. And down here below for investments, so I'll jump past the rates for a second here. So the investments are where you say, what do you feel comfortable putting in? So that individual that we just mentioned has a 600 roughly cash flow per month. We're going to say they're going to put half of it into investments, and then they're going to enjoy life on the remaining $300 that they have roughly. So they put in their amount that they're going to invest, and let's say that over the next 30 years, they invest the exact same. You're probably asking, what are all these tiers in here? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. These are in 5-year increments because life changes over time. You might only want to invest for 20 years. You might have a kid in 5 years. You might decide to, do whatever it might be that you want to do. And so I have this set up for 5 years so that we can think about life as it changes over 5 years. The other most important thing is when you're investing, the way that you invest money is going to change between now to 15 years from now. You're probably going to be out of the growth stocks and more into dividend stocks or bonds by that time. And so, yes, you heard my beautiful Bengal in the background. He loves to sing. It's impossible to record and cut all of that out. So, with this all being said, what does this all mean? So, from a rate perspective, I'm using two basic EFTs here. VOO, they're a Vanguard growth stock. It basically mimics the S&P 500. And the Vanguard dividend stock, VYM, and that is more of a dividend style stock. It's a dividend EFT. These two types of stocks are stocks that you could just dump your money in and not manage them. They're not something like, oh, did Ford go up today? Oh, did Hertz decide to hurt you by going bankrupt? Don't worry about that. Just put your money in EFTs. It is the most simplest way to do this. If you're buying and selling weekly, you might as well just go to the casino because that's literally what you're doing. You're gambling. So, what are those two stocks for a second? Before we dive into all the numbers, I just want to show you the way that the setup here is. The EFT for growth stocks, I've got it starting at 4%, 3, 2, 1, 0. By the end of the 30 years, we've got dividend stocks starting at 3% growth, 4% growth, and then all the way at the last, call it 15 years into dividend stocks. Now, you're probably like, and so ultimately, what does that mean? That means that you're expecting your stocks to grow at 7%, 6%, and 5%. You're probably like, well, hold up, the market pays 8 to 10% a year. Yes, that's inclusive of inflation. We need to exclude inflation from our analysis so that we can say, how is our life today compared to our life in the future? So, is this realistic? Well, these two stocks I have here, here's a picture of the first one. So over the last 5 years, the CAGR on this one is a little over 20%. Well, what's a CAGR? It's a beer, right? A beautiful, beautiful Coors Light, right? No. It's the compounded annual growth rate. What that means is how has the stock performed over time? And so the CAGR on this one on a 5-year, it's almost as simple as just dividing it by 5. You could see that this one's growing at more than 20% a year. So my baby 7% that I have out there in my front investment input tab is extremely passive. And that's what you want to be when you're investing and you're thinking about your future, because you might outlive that age. You might also have some downtime. So you really want to think passive. You don't want to think aggressive because you're going to get yourself burned. The second stock is the high dividend yield. So over the 5-year CAGR on this one, you're looking at about 20% growth over 5 years with a CAGR of about 4%. Now that's growth. This also pays you 3% dividends, and in the current year, it's actually paying 2.5%, which means not only did it grow 4% a year, but it also paid you 2% every single year, which means it pays you 6%. So now if I go back to the beginning here, and again, these are two just standard EFTs that a lot of people invest in. It's great to put your money in. You don't have to manage it and worry about it over time. And, when things like the market crashing this year for COVID, if you invest bi-weekly monthly, whatever it is, the average over the long haul will be better than it is today. At least that's what history has taught us. I have never seen it consistently go negative. I've never seen a graph decide that it's going to act like the ski slopes and just continue down. It always comes back over time. And the one thing you can do is invest in EFTs, like the two I have in front of you, because these two type of EFTs, they're going to be the ones that you don't have to worry about. You don't have to check your phone every day and go, "Oh man, how's the stocks going? Is my retirement on path?" You put it into these two type of stocks early in the career. You put a lot of money into the EFT for growth, and then down the way you put more into the high dividend yield, because as you see here, the high dividend yield doesn't grow, but it doesn't shrink as much either. So if you're pulling money out and you're worried about losing a ton if the market crashes, high dividend stocks do not move as volatile as growth stocks do. So, with all that being said, let's jump back to this example here. So that's how I came up with my rates. If you want to be aggressive, by any means, put in the aggressive factors in here. But let's just look at, what does this say? So if they're gonna start at age 20 for 30 years, they're gonna put $300 away, and they want to live 35 years in retirement. What does this mean? So I'm gonna hit the macro, and it says this individual will have a burn rate of $1,200 per month for 35 years. And you're probably going, hold up, that's not enough. And if we go back to the budget, for an example, this individual needs $2,500 a month just to live. So that clearly tells you I need to do more, or I need to give more in the future into my investing to hit the mark. One thing I will say is, from today to the future, for 30 years, typically you buy a house and in 30 years your house is paid off. So your total household expenditures typically go away. You will pay property tax and insurance and your utilities, which is probably 25% of that, but you will have to cover more than likely some form of health care, whether it has to be on your own by retiring early, so you're not on Medicare yet, so that's expensive. And so what I would like to say is, long story short, whatever your expenses are today, you should more than likely think of those as what they will be in the future, because your household will go away and your health insurance costs will go up to more than likely net each other out. So now, how is this guy going to retire at age 50? Well, let's think about if they were to add all 600. Let's say they go their whole cash flow for the rest of the time. What does that mean? Well, let's run the macro again. Now, if they put their entire cash flow in today for the next 30 years of their life, never increase it, they're going to retire with the same amount of burn rate that they have today. Mind you, this is where it really comes up to you and what you need to do in order to achieve this. And the burn rate that you will need in the future really comes up to your own personal where you're going to live, and ultimately what things you think you'll need in the future. So if today you live happily and you enjoy your costs that you're at today, they're more than likely going to be sufficient in the future. The only difference is you're going to get to enjoy hiking in the Grand Canyon, or maybe taking a helicopter to the Grand Canyon, or maybe walking around the Amazon rainforest, and you're not going to have to worry about coming back to work on Monday. You're going to get to enjoy those vacations. And so keep this in mind. And now, the one thing that I will say is that investing early is very important. So if you start when you're 20 versus when you're 30, the compounding effect that you have from growth stocks growing and dividends being reinvested in the market will ultimately always yield higher if you start early. So this is why it's very important you understand your cash flow today, and you come out with a game plan for the next 30 years, 20 years, whatever it might be, where you put this money away so that you can retire at a respectable age, and ultimately so you're not broke at 60. Here. So part 2, we're talking about 401k investing. For the most part, most people have a 401k or some form of retirement that's like this. So with a 401k, there's either the traditional form, which is you put money up front today, it's a tax deduction today, but you pay for it in the future. So anything you pull out, 100% taxable. Where there's a Roth type 401k where you actually pay taxes on the dollars up front, and then in the future, you pay nothing. So the benefits to the Roth are that there's no capital gains to it. You pay on the investment up front. The capital gains are free in the future. Where a traditional, you put all your money in today, and it gives you a tax deduction, which in theory gives you a bigger cash flow today to use to ultimately maybe invest more into your personal investment strategy. So with that being said, we're going to use the same individual here. Starts off with zero value in their 401k, invest for 30 years and retire in 35. They have the same rate structures as we did in the other one. What you'll probably notice is with a 401k, they're more than likely going to have a fund out there called a target fund that you'll probably invest in or at least start in, where it'll have the year that you plan to retire. So like target fund 2055 or something of that nature. That'll be time frame that you'll retire, which will ultimately have a strategy that's more aggressive up front and then more passive in the later years, which is very similar to what we've talked about today. And then from the contribution perspective, you have to think about what is your salary today, which I have the 50,000, and then what is your employee match, as well as what do you put in as an employee. So I put 3 and 3 in here, being very conservative. Some employers have it, some don't. But if they do have it, take advantage of it. It's always free money, and it's worth it in every scenario that I can imagine right now. There's very, very, very limited circumstances that it does not make sense to at least take your employer match. So with that being said, the other thing is you're probably saying, well, those tiers represent 5 years. I'm going to make more than 50,000 in the future. That's great. But the way I think about it, and not everyone will maybe agree with this, is I say today, what do you make? Ignore your 2% you get every year because that's, again, inflation. You're getting raises based on inflation. The things that you should put in here are promotions, meaning you're actually taking on more work and you're actually having a higher base salary, which today you get 50,000 as an analyst, tomorrow you get 60,000 as a senior analyst. That's an example of a jump you'd want to put in here if you really want to think about it that way. But the way I think about it is set up your baseline today, take your cash flow, invest your personal dollars today, like we had just talked about, and then see where that gets you. Does it get it where you want to be in 30 years from today? And then when you get a promotion, enjoy life. Take that promotion value, that extra cash flow you get a new vehicle, get a better house or a bigger house, maybe upgrade different things that you like to do. Go on a trip. I mean, if you set your finances up today, everything that you get in the future that's above your current cash flow is gravy. It's literally rain and money. Like you get to go have fun how you want to, and you get to live at this age while you're young, not spending all your money when you're 65 and you can't get around or, do fun activities like you probably could do in your 30s or 20s, depending on. So that's my strategy. That's how I look at it. Take promotions, enjoy them, set your strategy up, live tight while you're young because you can, and then take those other future promotions and increases in money to ultimately fund the enjoyments that you want to do outside of work, of course. So the other thing I want to talk about is when you think about post-retirement strategies, you do have to pull out of a 401k. There is a requirement distribution that you have to have, but ignoring that for a moment, this is one thing I forgot to mention on the other investment side is that the post-retirement, when you pull money out, that money is still growing. It's still getting either dividends or if it's still for some reason in growth stocks, it might still grow. And so you got to think about over those years of retirement that's still growing actually. And so when you pull money out, it still has a balance. So keep that in mind. So with all that being said, this individual right here, what this would do is if they were to have 30 years invest, 35 years in retirement, and using 50,000 as a base salary their whole time, what does that mean for a burn rate perspective? It gives them $1,000 in cash. One other thing I want to point out is if you retire at the age of 50 and you start pulling funds out at the age of 50, you will get hit with a naughty penalty. It will be devastating. 401ks are something you do not want to pull out of early or have early withdrawals on. That penalty is very bad. And so this might be one of those items that you retire in 30 years, you let it sit there for another 10 so that you can actually start pulling on it, then you pull on it, it grows for an extra 10 years. That I'm not going into in this video. This is more for illustrative purposes. The other thing that this video doesn't include is that, so this individual would have a burn rate of 1,000. We think about the personal investments, which had a burn rate of 2,400. These are pre-tax values. So investing, the reason why I'm not going into taxes are, it's very important where you live. If you live in Florida, you don't pay income tax. So you only pay federal. For a 401k perspective, you might pull early. Then you have to pay a penalty. You might be using a Roth, which means you don't pay anything on it. And you might do a traditional, which means you pay it all on it. So this is excluding tax. There's too many variables to talk about. And so hopefully today, between the two items that I've just discussed here, this helps you understand investing strategies and how you can start building them up. Use this file to your advantage. It's free. FREE is it's out there for you to play around with. One disclaimer is that you always got to remember that these are strategies. They don't yield guaranteed results. And that from a tax perspective, they're very unique between investing in personal. So if you hold stocks for longer than a year, you pay capital gains. For 401ks, traditional versus Roth, they all have significant differences, and they are some things that need to be considered. So, with all that being said, I hope you learned a little bit about investing. I hope this started sparking thoughts about how you could take your cash flow today and start putting it into investing, and is it worth it? The one thing that I would say is create a strategy that you do bi-weekly, bi-monthly, and do not go away from it. Do not get into the game of buying and selling. It is a very bad habit, and it creates more burns than good. And so, with all that being said, I hope you enjoyed the video. I hope you learned something. And as always, I have my Twitch up every Sunday night about 9 p.m. Central. Somewhere between 9 and 10 p.m. Central, I'll go live. That is when you can come in here. We can talk about anything. You want to talk about taxes, personal finance, corporate finance, anything of that nature. I'll be free to discuss or research with you. Also, as mentioned, if there's stocks you want to go over and have me pull up their 10Ks and 10Qs and review them, put the comments down below, like, subscribe. It's greatly appreciated for the YouTube algorithm to help me grow and help others manage their personal finance. So, have a good rest of your day, and I'll talk to you next time.